you do with your grief? Is that something you've ever just sat with and explored within yourself what it is that you do with your grief? What do I do with my grief? And I'm specifically referring to childhood. Because so many of us carry grief from childhood. You know, it's easy to refer to it as sort of the traumas that ensued, because certain things were in fact traumatic and lingering. And still, inside of that trauma, inside of that which perhaps has not ever met repair or resolve or reconnection or exploration, inquiry, a conversation, is grief. And often we go about the days of our lives, we move through the years, not realizing the gravity that's within us. And that gravity is grief. How something can, not poke, but prick us in a way where we feel sad or, down or off kilter, not quite sure what's wrong. There's nothing perhaps to point at or to, nothing necessarily happened that led to what we're feeling. What is it that I'm feeling? What's behind the unknown here? What's behind the murk, the heaviness, the weight? It's grief. Many of us have not paused long enough to sit with the pain and the hurt of grief. We may be triggered by something and become upset by something, which is often the easier response. It's easier to be upset than it is to feel the tender softness of vulnerability. And grief is tender and soft, and it points at vulnerability. And we don't often carve out the space to be with it, to hold it. And so all of the yesteryears of our childhood experiences, they sort of follow us like the smoke behind Pigpen from Charlie Brown. It's just sort of wafting about us. There have been more than one occasion when I've sat with the grief of my own childhood. All that I felt that went missing, the I love yous I never heard, the hugs I never received, the adoration that was not there, the inspiration, the affection, all of the tender things that requires one to be vulnerable. I've had to sit with the grief of that and mourn the loss. And there's no replacement for what went missing. There is a moving on, there's a moving forward, there is a loving ourselves well. There is a tending to ourselves in the ways that were not there when we needed them. But childhood cannot be undone. We cannot unsee what has been seen. And so what do we do with the grief? In my own sitting, I often journal. It allows me to get what's inside out on paper. It allows me to process thoughts and feelings, to see things more clearly. And that's important to me, to see clearly what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, and to unpack it and to allow the memories of childhood to come to the fore and hold that and be with the tears that come as a result of contacting all that went missing. It's important. It's healing, it's holding, it's sustaining. Grief deserves our time and attention. Grief deserves to be held. Our grief deserves to be held. Not banished or tucked away somewhere over there. I shouldn't feel this way. I should get over it. Why am I sad? There's no judgment. There's compassion. There's grace. There's love and softness. So in this moment, I'm thinking about what it is that we do with our grief, particularly of childhood. Have we held it and looked at it and inquired and soothed it and said, yes, this grief is real. Like love and pain and laughter and joy and heartache and happiness are also real. Or do we sort of want to shun it, shut it down, erase it from the layers that make us who we are? What do we do with our grief? Are we denying the right of it? Are we exploring the fullness of it? Are we blaming? Are we so angry that we're mad that we're even grieving? I hate that I feel this way. I shouldn't feel this way. Had you been other than the way that you were, I'd be other than how I am. But that's a drain that circles into one's suffering. It's cyclic. It's sickening. It's suffering. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't satisfy. But sometimes the pain of childhood, whatever happened there, the pain, it keeps us from trusting that there is another way. It keeps us from believing that something more exists, that we can have a different way of being within ourselves, that we too can be loosed, set free from the angst. But if we only point out there somewhere and not look within here and explore how we are impacted and hold and love and care for our grief, then there is no path out of it. We circle the circumference of the cycle of suffering. But there is a path out, and that path is within. I want to really just encourage us to pause and acknowledge our grief. Feel the feelings that come with acknowledging grief, and explore them, and then unpack all the things that come up little by little. Be gentle. Be safe with your emotions, your psyche. But be willing to turn toward yourself, because you are worthy and worth the freedom that comes with holding grief, looking at grief, loving the grief, healing through grief, and then becoming as a result of having gone in. Robert Frost says the only way around is through. Often we want to just get to the other side, but we're unwilling to go through. I invite us to go through, to be willing to go through, and to ask ourselves of our grief and what it is that we do with it, and how might we become and bloom and blossom like a lotus from the mud because of it. That we not deny the right of grief, but that we invite its presence before us and learn. That we give ourselves all that went missing, because the doing cannot be undone, the seeing cannot be unseen, but the exploration of right now can be explored. So if there is grief that you have carried from your childhood, I invite you, like I invite myself, to look closely therein, sit with it, and learn, and be free. What are you doing with your grief? Tell me about it. Thank you for being here, for again lending me your ear and coming back around this week, and I hope you come back around next week and keep on coming back around. I appreciate your time, your attention, and your ear always, truly, and I do. I really do. So, until next time, what are you doing with your grief?